Welcome to Bad Nerds. I really am a nerd right now. I love these effects. Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh shoot, they're still on. Okay, so this time we're going to talk about Amazing Spider-Man 2012. This movie just was released.
Yes.
Okay, so let's just start it off, right?
All right.
So I'm going to ask you, Danny, more questions because you are the comic enthusiast. I want to hear your point of view, and I'll just follow up from there with what I think about that as well. Does that work for you?
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
First question is, what were your first thoughts when you heard this movie was coming out?
Well, when I first heard it was coming out, I thought that was really fast. You know, Spider-Man 3 had only come out like 5 years ago, so I was like, that's really quick for them to reboot it.
5 years is a pretty long time, buddy.
Well, yeah, no, that's true. I mean, 5 years is a long time, but it just seemed fast, you know. Like if you compared it to like other comic movie franchises like Batman. Like the original Batman with Michael Keaton came out, I want to say 89. You know, so you figure they didn't reboot Batman until Batman Begins, which was just a couple of years ago. So there's a pretty far gap.
Well,
you know,
Batman and Robin and all those weren't a reboot either?
Well, no, but they were continuing on the original Batman.
Oh, it's been a while since
I
I watched them. Okay.
Yeah, they were continuing. So for them to like, because this is now only 10 years, this reboot is only 10 years from the original Spider-Man, because Tobey Maguire Spider-Man started in 2002, so this is now 2012. So it was like, okay, wow, 10 years, you know, they did 2 movies in that time, and then they rebooted it. So it seemed kind of fast, but, you know, in 10 years, you figure, you know, a lot more kids are around, you know, maybe there's kids that didn't even see the original Amazing Spider-Man 2002, because they might have been a year or two old, you know, so now they're 10 years old, 11 years old, you know, now it's time for them to see it. And is there really a bad time to put out another comic movie, really? I mean, we can always use more, right?
That's true, and because this is a different world, I mean, this is Amazing Spider-Man, which I only know a little bit, but I do know that Spider-Man has, you know, so many different stories that he tells, you know,
right.
So not many people probably knew why the heck it was called Amazing Spider-Man as opposed to the other. But I know I was excited when I first heard this coming out, but because I don't know the comics that well, I was really curious to be like, okay, what's different with Amazing Spider-Man as opposed to the other one? So that was...
And that's what everybody's original thought was, too, like, oh, they're just going to do the same thing, you know, Uncle Ben's going to die, you know, he gets bit by a spider, the same, you know, like, the same thing we've seen a billion times, you know, so, yeah, it was kind of, people were kind of like, you know, it seemed kind of fast, but after seeing the movie, which we'll get into, you know, they did a good job, I think, of keeping it fresh.
Good. So let's talk about the cast. Did you happen to research the cast members before you actually saw the movie? If you did, what did you think?
I didn't really research them. I mean, I knew Dennis Leary was going to be in it, and I thought that was pretty awesome. Because most of the time when they do these movies, like, the main character is the one who's the big name actor, or nobody is at all, you know? Like for example, like X-Men First Class, you know, like the main characters weren't really like well-known actors, but then you had the villain, you know, Kevin Bacon, you know, who's an extremely well-known person.
Right.
So that's kind of what they did with Spider-Man, is they took Dennis Leary and took someone who everybody knows, you know, and put him in a role that's pretty similar, because he's pretty much the guy from Rescue Me, you know, but and then they took someone like Emma Stone, you know, who's awesome.
I love Emma Stone. When she was the one, when I knew that she was in here, I was like, I don't give a crap if the movie flops. I'm gonna because I know she will bring something good to the table, because the woman does know how to act, and that's what I give her. She is a good-looking woman.
Right.
She knows how to act. So that to me was a very big plus.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, she kind of fit that that mold, you know, of what they were looking for in a Gwen Stacy type, you know. And you know, if you any of her movies that I've seen, I haven't ever had an issue with her acting. So I was very excited to see her in that kind of role, because you didn't want, like, you know, the girl who played Gwen Stacy in Spider-Man 3. I mean, she didn't have a lot of airtime, but she wasn't that great, I didn't think, in my opinion. You know, she was kind of bland as an actress.
So
yeah, exactly. It was totally unremarkable. You know what I mean? And then as far as anybody else, like, I have no idea who Andrew Garfield was. You know, you know, I had no idea who he was. And anybody else, I didn't know that Martin Sheen was Uncle Ben until I saw the movie. I didn't know that Sally Field was Aunt May.
Sally Field was my biggest, like, it was a ballpark. I was like, I love Sally Field. I'm back in, like, Steel Magnolias kind of movies. This is Doubtfire. And Sally Field, it was amazing. And I saw this with my mother and my father, and we were both kind of looked at each other. As soon as we saw the screen, we're like, Sally Field is
right.
Aunt May? It's just so unlikely, but I think she did well.
Yeah.
But
I think so, yeah.
I guess let's just move into the next question, because I just spoiled it for myself.
Right.
Wanted to ask you, how did you think that all the actors that we talked about did in the movie, their performance-wise, without going into the story too much, just, you know, convict to the characters, and or was there something that was amiss, should I say?
I mean, as far as the acting, I mean, I thought Andrew Garfield did an awesome job as Peter Parker. You know, he really had those, like, nerdy tics to him, you know, that really made it believable. He had the Peter Parker hair, you know, that was, like, messed up all the time, but kind of on purpose, you know, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, like, I mean, I thought the acting, you know, was really good by everybody. I really didn't have anybody that was like, that was an obvious, like, wow, it's terrible acting, you know. I thought all around the whole cast did a good job.
I think in comparison to the other Spider-Man movies, where a lot of people were complaining about Kirsten Dunst?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think she's okay, but is she really strong? No.
Right.
As far as a female role, once again, Emma Stone did her thing. She played a great role. I didn't have any problem with her acting. Aunt May, being another female, I didn't have any problem with her acting, and I really liked, I had no clue who the main character was that was playing this Spider-Man. None. Like, no idea. And I still really don't know who it is. But I think he did a very good job. He was very convincing. The beginning of the movie, which was more definitely storyline and driven to kind of put the connection between him, his family, and Gwen Stacy, I just thought that was done so well. It kept your interest because their skills as an actor and actresses were good.
Right. No, yeah, I definitely felt like this cast did a really good job. You know, there wasn't really any weak actors as far as I saw.
So let's move into the storyline then. I mean, we covered it in our introduction video, kind of, that, of course, Spider-Man spans years and years, you know, in comics. And this one is specifically following Amazing Spider-Man, which the only noticeable difference that I know, to be quite honest, what they did from the other movies is that Spider-Man is using his webs based on his intelligence and creating them, as opposed to them being something natural that comes out of him. And with that being said, my question to you is, how close did this movie hold true to the Amazing Spider-Man series?
I think the majority of it was pretty close to where, you know, you're coming from as far as the storyline. There's a lot of deviations, but they get to the same places the same way. You know, I think they really played up him as the science nerd, you know, in this more so than the original Spider-Man. You know, he was solving equations, and he was looking at his father's work and actually deciphering what his father was doing. You know, Tobey Maguire never did that in the original Spider-Man. Not that, you know, it's his fault, but they never had him doing any of that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, like you said, he didn't create his web shooters. They just came out of his wrist somehow. I don't know. But, you know, that kind of, they gave you the background for all the different elements so much more And the changes that they did make to this storyline, I actually thought were better, you know, than how it was originally. And for example, the way the whole Uncle Ben thing, you know, in Spider-Man 1, he's sitting in a car waiting for Peter, and then he gets carjacked. Mm-hmm. You know, and I'm not saying that doesn't happen, you know, but yeah, it just seemed kind of weird. Like, the guy carjacked that car, you know, why that car, you know, at that time.
Now, how did it happen in the comics, though? Do you remember that far back?
Yeah.
Well, in Amazing Spider-Man, obviously, how did Ben, how did he die?
Well, in the original Spider-Man, it was a robber. Like, he came into the house. Mm-hmm. You know, he came to their house and robbed them. Okay. You know, and when Ben went to protect Aunt May, you know, the guy shot him. And that's how he died. So neither movie did any of that part at all, you know. But at least this movie seemed more believable, with the robber running out of the place, tripping, gun falls out, Uncle Ben tries to get it away from him, you know, trying to save people, and ends up getting shot in the process. That, to me, was a little more believable than just the guy's parked and the robber decides to jack his old car that he has, you know. It just didn't seem, you know.
And it had that suspense.
Right.
You know? You're like, okay, how are they going to do this? We all know what's going to happen, but how are they going to do it? And they just executed it pretty well, because even though we knew it was going to happen, or anyone who knows even an inkling about Spider-Man knows that it's going to happen, but it was still done to a point that it was like, oh, wow, that's different, you know?
Right. Well, and even just the whole part of where he interacted with the robber. You know, in the original Spider-Man was in his costume. You know, he wasn't a superhero yet. He was just hanging out at the wrestling rink, earning money. Okay? Yeah. And the guy who owned the wrestling rink shortchanged him money, because he's like, I don't know your name. I can just give you whatever, and there's nothing you can do about it. Because who are you going to do? You're going to go to the cops? What are you? You're going to want to know your name. So Spider-Man walks out there. He's pissed off because he got less money. And here the robber comes, steals money from the wrestling guy, and he's running past Spider-Man.
Right.
Spider-Man's like, screw you. Yeah. Here you go. And he lets him go. And the cops are pissed. The cops are chasing after the robber. And they're like, why didn't you help him? And Spider-Man's like, oh, it's not my problem. It's not my issue. You know. Whereas in the movie, I felt like they did that. They came across it better, because, you know, like, he's trying to buy, what was it, chocolate milk or something stupid like that. Yeah. And the clerk was giving him a hard time because he needed, like, a couple more cents or something dumb like that. Mm-hmm. You know, you can't take a penny. You can give a penny, but you can't take a penny, was the whole line there. And then the robber robs the guy, and Spider-Man's like, oh, well, whatever, that's what you get. You know? That, to me, was a little more, like, believable versus the whole wrestling thing. You know?
I hear you. That's a good point. I agree with you.
Yeah.
It's all to be agreed, but I do agree with you that
none of them were bad. I didn't think any of them were, like, bad ways to set up Uncle Ben dying, but I did like this one. It seemed more of a modern take. You know?
I do agree with that. As far as, I guess, we'll talk with Lizard Man, how do you think his character was done? I thought it was really good, but I believe we had a discussion back and forth on Google Plus about him constantly injecting himself in order to, you know, turn into the lizard. Right. Can you expand upon what you were saying and why you didn't totally care for that?
I think if you know the Lizard from the comics is kind of like the Hulk, you know, like Bruce Banner and the Hulk, in that he's the bad side of Kirk Connors. You know, Bruce Banner is a good guy, and the Hulk is what happens when he gets mad, and he can't control it. He has no control over what he can do. He's not smart. He can't figure out things. He's just Hulk smash, you know, type thing. Well, Kirk Connors was like that too, because, again, the setup was the same. He was trying to regrow back his arm. Mm-hmm. But he would occasionally turn into this lizard beast who couldn't talk English. You know, he would slur words, and he would say them with S's, you know, like a reptile.
Yeah.
He couldn't figure out you know, things or create, you know, chemical bombs, you know, or anything like that. You know, he was not.
That was what you were saying, and that they did here in the one part of the movie. He remembered how to do something. He put this contraption into that and threw it. It exploded, and you know, I get you.
Yeah, it's like wait. All of a sudden, he's smart now. He's a lizard beast. Like he's not even supposed to be able to talk. Like he was talking perfect English. You know, there was no slurring, nothing.
It's kind of like they're giving him too much power. So, okay, he's not only super smart, but you're saying he's super strong. He can climb freaking walls. He can smash the, you know, he can do all this stuff. He can regrow all his stuff really fast. Because if you see, they made that incredibly fast. And maybe that's why they did the whole injecting himself more. The more times he injects himself, the more quicker his regrowth was happening. I don't know. They didn't really, you know, maybe that's how they worked it in, but they didn't.
Yeah, they didn't expand on it a lot.
Right. They didn't say that this is the reason why he can regrow himself faster because he injected himself. You know, there wasn't that specific thing, but looking back on it, like we're talking now, I can kind of see that maybe being, but he, based on what you're saying, he should have some kind of weakness, and Lizard Man being kind of like an imbecile would be a weakness, but now giving him all this intelligence and perfect speech while being the lizard. I'm calling him Lizard Man. I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's the lizard. Yeah.
Sorry, the lizard. It's like he is almost unstoppable, really.
Right. Exactly. And that was kind of my issue. My other issue with it was too, when you read the comics, you felt bad for Kirk Connors because he didn't want to be the lizard. The lizard was his bad side that came out, that he was uncontrollable. Things would happen. He would threaten his family. He would do things. I mean, even the last couple years, they did a comic series where the lizard actually kills Kirk Connors' son. And that's a huge storyline. He killed his son, Billy. That's huge. Because it has such big implications, because not only was Spider-Man unable to save this kid's life, but now Kirk Connors has to live with the fact that he killed his own son.
Yeah,
the problem for me with the movie is that he's knowingly, first of all, he's knowingly continuing to inject himself. And first of all, it seemed like the only way he could turn into the lizard was if he injected himself, because it wore off after a while, which, again, in the comics, he only injected himself once in the comics, and he was constantly going back and forth. Here, he needs to purposefully inject himself, so he knows what he's doing. So as a viewing audience, like, how do you really feel bad for this guy? Because he knows what he's doing, and then when he is a lizard, he still knows what he's doing. You know, like, it's not like, so there's no sympathy.
Well, I guess they were trying to base the sympathy on his arm, saying that this guy's been without his arm, because they did do those dramatic shots of his hand, and, you know, every time he's injecting himself, instead of injecting himself anywhere else, he's specifically injecting himself on his arm, you know, to emphasize that even more. But what you're saying is basically that that's not enough. That wasn't enough to justify all of that.
No, because the first scene you see of him is he's tossing cars off the bridge with people in them. So any sympathy you might have had for him is gone. And especially once you find out after that he's injecting himself purposefully and purposely turning himself into this monster, and that he knows what he's doing as he's this monster, you're not going to have any sympathy. There's no way you can have sympathy for that guy, because he knows what he's doing, and he doesn't feel bad about it.
Yeah.
You know, and then that was another issue about that, is that the lizard always fought Spider-Man, and he couldn't help himself from, you know, Kirk Connors couldn't prevent the lizard from fighting Spider-Man because he was not in control of his actions. In this movie, why is the lizard fighting Spider-Man? Like, what's his motivation? Like, why? Like, there's no reason. They don't give you a reason, like, oh, because Spider-Man's there, that's why he's fighting them. Oh, really? That's the only reason? Like, that just seems kind of dumb, right?
Yeah, he said, well, he did say something like Spider-Man will not get in my way this time or something, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't like, okay, Spider-Man got in your way because you're trying to basically killing people.
Right, exactly. What did you think was going to happen?
Exactly. Someone's got to be there to stop you. Hello, you're not going to just run amok and get away with it all the time.
Right.
So, yeah, that was too simplistic, I guess, is what you're saying. There should have been more It should have been a little bit more complex as far as why he really wants to get rid of Spider-Man. This is just really too simple. Yeah.
It's too much the hero versus a monster.
Yeah.
And we've seen that. Like, you know, not just in comic movies, but you've seen that in tons of movies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but if they would have added that layer of depth where you would have felt bad for the villain at the same time that you know, felt for him. Like they did with Magneto in X-Men First Class.
Mm-hmm.
They make you feel bad for a guy who's, you know, is going to become a murderer and is going to become this terrible person because you see his mother being killed and you see the torture he gets put into.
Yep.
And then he becomes the villain we all know he's going to become at the end of the movie.
Gotcha.
So, you know, they could have done that. You know what I mean? And I don't understand really why they didn't. It just seems they went just a very simplistic route, and I don't think that was for the best. You know, for someone who doesn't know the comics, then you're not going to notice those things, and you're just going to be like, it was a great movie. And I still think it was a good movie, but that extra layer of depth, I think, could have taken it up a notch. You know, and made it so much of an amazing movie. You know,
right? It's true because the movie was definitely more suspenseful, a little bit more dramatic. You got, you know, more sentimental in the beginning, especially. Right. So they could have just upped it another notch,
right,
and kind of continued with that whole thing throughout the entire movie. But there's a definite break from the beginning when they're explaining, you know, Peter Parker, Uncle Ben, that whole scenario, and.
Right.
Gwen Stacy, and then you get to him, and as soon as he turns into Lizard Man, it totally changes.
The Lizard.
I'm saying it again. I don't know why I keep saying it. The Lizard. When he changes into the Lizard, it just totally changes. And I guess
the
only thing I can assume is that they did that purposefully. You know, they wanted to change it from this kind of somberness, you know, all this stuff happening to, okay, now we're getting into the action. Now we want to have a distinguished villain. So make him be a villain. They didn't want you to have that sympathy because they wanted you kind of to hate him. And for Spider-Man to be able to kick his ass. I don't know. You know, because I guess if you really think about it, the other movies kind of had what you're saying with what is it, Green Goblin or whatever, when he found out who he was, and he didn't want to kill him. He didn't want to do all this stuff, and they did do that a little here. But I guess if they would have done with what you said and built up sympathy with the Lizard, then maybe it would have been falling into that same thing again. That Spider-Man is too noble. He doesn't want to do all this, blah blah blah, and it could have fell into the trap of being repetitive.
And especially when you think about the person who Kurt Connors is. You know, Kurt Connors worked with Peter's dad for, what they say, like 20-some years, you know? Like, he worked side by side, and he knew Peter as a kid. So all of a sudden, we're supposed to believe, like, he becomes a Lizard, and he's like, oh, well, now I want to kill this kid. Like, there's no motivation for it. It is what it is, and that's it. And I just think they had so much good material. They could have just added, you know, a couple minutes or you know, a little bit just to expand on it, you know, to make you feel like, how is this guy who was a scientist, you know, smart guy. Now, this isn't some street thug we're talking about, you know. This is a smart, intelligent guy, and now all of a sudden he thinks it's okay to just run around in bridges and toss people out of cars and, like, you know, random stuff. Like, how do you go from that, you know?
Yeah, that's difficult.
If he's an uncontrollable beast and he can't control it, okay, that makes perfect sense, and anybody can wrap their head around that. But the fact that you're telling me this guy is still a scientist, still knows all this stuff, but this is the way he acts, I don't know. It's kind of a stretch for me, you know?
I did have to ask a question. From what I saw, because I used to watch the cartoon, the animated series of Spider-Man, and the Lizard was a part of that, and that's how I kind of do remember that he was a little crazy, even though I think, honestly, in that cartoon series, he did have a little bit of intelligence, not as much as they're showing here.
Right.
Was he ever, like, surrounded by other lizards? That was something different from me, too. I didn't know what the heck was going on to that. Like, okay, they have ESPN, they can talk to each other.
Right, yeah. ESP, you mean, not ESPN.
I know, I said that on purpose.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, they've done things where like that, where like reptiles follow him, you know, and he's like in the swamps and lizards will follow him and types of things. So they've done that kind of stuff before, and they've gone back and forth with his level of intelligence to the point where like he can talk a little bit, but it's always slurring words. It's never like it's never like perfect English like you or me, like what the movie was, you know. Like they never had him at that point.
Oh, okay. I was just confused about that because I couldn't remember for the life of me, based on the little bit of comics that I know and based on the animated series that I saw, if there were ever any other lizards present that behaved in a similar manner. So I did have to ask that. So let's go into the next question I have for you, and that is, if you could have added something specifically to the movie, what would it be? And if so, why?
Well, pretty much what we just talked about, actually. Just made it more of the sympathy, you know, added to the lizard creature himself. The dynamic between Captain Stacy and Peter Parker, I thought was awesome. The dinner table scene, I mean, that was a fantastic scene.
Yeah, it was.
That should have been 15 minutes long. I mean, why it was only like 2 or 3 minutes? I mean, that should have been much longer. They definitely, I feel like, they killed him way too early.
Okay.
You know, I really felt like, yes, he does, Captain Stacy does die in the comics, you know, but he could have been he could have been later on, in the second movie, you know, whatever, or something like that. They could have waited to do that. I'm a little disappointed that they did it so fast, you know, and then he learned of Spider-Man's identity so fast, too. I mean, everybody in the movie knows Spider-Man is Peter Parker.
Yeah, that's something I was confused about, too. I was like, wow. I was like, they really went in a different direction. I think that's why they did this, is because the other movie, it took, 3 movies for everybody to know? Right. So this one, they're like, well, we're going to go the opposite way. We're going to go number 1. Everybody knows.
Yeah, every major character knows he's
Spider-Man. Aunt May, I think, right? She's the only one
but I think she knows, too, because...
Right. They did have an implication.
Right.
But it's not said in stone.
She kind of knew, yeah.
So she's, I guess, the only one out of the main cast that you're not 100% sure if she knows. They showed like she has an idea.
Right.
But you don't.
I mean,
know.
she can't be that stupid. I mean, he's coming home with scratches all over his face. You know, he's bleeding. He's beat up. Like, that's not from a bully. Like, you know, he came home pretty ripped up. His shirt's all ripped up. You know. I don't know. I don't think she's that naive.
I guess, but then again, how many people come home, like, if they have a scenario with that, and like, oh, you're a superhero.
Well, no, yeah, that's true. That's true.
So you think of it that way, too. I mean, in a normal respect, someone comes home beat up, you just think that they got beat up or they got into fights.
Yeah.
You're not.
That's true, yeah.
That they're hanging with the bad crowd.
Right. Yeah, very bad crowd getting stretches like that.
Yeah. So I'm going to move around here. I'm going to say, because you mentioned it, that they killed him too early.
Captain Stacy, yeah.
Yeah. I get confused with the names. That's what I have.
That's okay.
That's why, yeah, that's. So you actually told me that they revealed this to be a trilogy, and I wasn't even aware of that, and that's pretty good. That means obviously they have a lot invested in this, and this must have done well. I think it done well. But how do you think they're going to take it? Where do you think they're going to go in the next movie now that Mr. Stacy, whatever, right?
Captain Stacy, yeah.
There you go. Captain Stacy is dead. Really? Right. The lizard is not dead. He was in the jail cell, and he was talking to somebody about Peter Parker's father, right?
Right.
So,
yeah,
I have a feeling that the father is going to be coming somehow, obviously, in the picture. But
or that he's going to be hunting for what happened to his father.
That's true. They could do that.
Because in the comics, his parents were dead.
Okay.
You know, his parents were killed during the war by the Red Skull.
The Red Skull, like the Red Skull in Captain America.
Right, Captain America, yeah.
Really?
They were actually...
They have a connection to that?
Well, because they had... his parents were agents for... I want to say they were agents for S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm 99% sure they were. and they were doing a mission, and the whole thing was that they were killed by the Red Skull. Now, they came back at some point later on in the comics, but we don't have to get into all that.
Oh,
that gets a little crazy.
Okay, well, that's, again, someone who doesn't know about comics. I'm like, what the hell? You just blew my mind right now.
That's really,
So, wow, that's interesting. So, well, based on what you just said there at the end, that they came back in a way or another. We're not going to go into details, but so it's quite possible that he could come back, or both.
Right, exactly. They could come back, yeah.
So they could go as far as that and make him come back. Now, I think if they're doing a trilogy, that would be like the peak. So I doubt that would happen in the second movie.
Right.
Build up to this: is he alive, or is he really dead? What's going on really with his father? What really happened? We know that that's going to be what's kind of stretching it. But I guess, like, who else can they really bring into the series that they don't have already? The only one that I remember from the animated series was this guy that used it like Shockwave or something. He kind of dressed it in like yellow.
Right. The Shocker, with the yellow and brown outfit, Yeah, I mean, he's mostly a jobber as far as the comic is concerned, basically that he just gets beat up by Spider-Man all the time. He's always captured. He's never been, like, I mean, I can't say he's never been, but he's not really considered, like, his storyline is not that deep. He's just a guy who bought wrist gadgets that make him do shockwaves, and it's never been a really deep storyline with him.
Okay, so then let's go down the list really quickly and say from the other Spider-Man movies, what enemies did they have there, which you hope that they wouldn't rehash and bring back, so that we can kind of like go through a checklist. They had obviously.
The big one is the Green Goblin. Obviously.
Green Goblin, yeah.
But he's in all three movies, at some point. I mean, they throw Osborn in your face this entire movie, this new one. Everything's Oscorp, everything is Norman Osborn. He's never in the movie. I don't know if he's going to... I have to imagine in the second or third one he's going to play some kind of part. I mean, it stinks because we already saw so much of him. Like, I don't know... Do they really want to do that again? That's...
the difference between, I know that there is the Green Goblin and the Hobgoblin. Did they cover Hobgoblin in the other movie?
No, but I don't think they're going to do that. All the Hobgoblin was a guy, an assassin, who found... Green Goblin used to have, like, hideouts all over the city with gliders and bombs and stuff, like Batman kind of would, type deal. So he could always turn into the Green Goblin no matter where he was in the city. Well, Hobgoblin just happened to be an assassin who came across one of these places. He stole all the material, but then he made himself a different outfit. I don't think they're going to go with that, because that just seems so generic, and it's still the same thing. It's still Green Goblin. It's just it's Hobgoblin, big deal. I would hope they do one of the more, like, original characters. I mean, going back to that scene with the lizard in the dark, there's a lot of speculation online about who the guy is that's talking to the lizard. Now, I don't think it's Red Skull. That seems kind of weird, and Red Skull can't disappear in midair, so that didn't seem right. Some people thought because the light was flickering that maybe it's Electro, because he can travel through, like, electricity and do that kind of thing, so he could have disappeared somehow through, like, an electrical outlet or whatever kind of thing.
I don't remember him too much, but okay.
Yeah, he was the guy with, like, he had the lightning bolts on his head, and he had, like, a green and yellow outfit.
Okay, now...
You know what I mean? Yeah, real flashy. That was, like, the whole 90s thing, 80s and 90s thing. But now, in the comics, he's a little more muted. He has a different outfit that's not as flashy. It could be the Chameleon. The Chameleon is a guy who can change his face into anybody.
Okay.
He can't really turn invisible or teleport, so I don't know. Although that could have just been an effect that they're going to use, to make... It doesn't have to necessarily mean that character is invisible or can teleport, just because of that scene.
And it's funny because I'm trying to think back to that scene. I mean, I saw it, but I don't really recall what you're saying about somebody... I remember someone talking. I remember them talking about Peter Parker's father, but I didn't pay that close attention to actually see that somebody disappeared.
Right.
So,
And maybe he didn't even disappear. Maybe it might have just been a lighting thing where like the shadow is so dark you can't see him.
Oh, okay.
You know, so it really could be anybody. You know, it really could. You know, I mean, I hope they're not going to retread the villains that they've had in the previous Spider-Mans, because I think those were kind of gone over, you know, pretty well in those movies. I'd rather see some newer villains.
And it means, like, we're going to go into Superman territory when they always have, Lex Luthor everywhere, and we're so over Lex Luthor, we want to vomit Lex Luthor, you know what I mean?
Right. Well, that's what Spider-Man was. Yeah, the first three were all Norman Osborn all the time, you know, and it just got kind of old. So hopefully they're not going to do that.
I would hope not, because this one seems like, besides the whole thing with the Lizard, as far as his character not being so true enough to his original character, they did a great job. So I would think that they would not want to rehash old characters. I mean, what about that woman, the woman who's like a cat or something? What is her name?
Oh, Black Cat.
Right, she wasn't in any of the other ones, was she?
No, she's never been in any other ones, no.
So...
Yeah, she could probably be in there, in one of them.
Yeah.
Maybe not a main villain, because I mean, she's kind of like the Catwoman of the Marvel Universe. Like,
she's kind of like both. She plays the field like both good, bad, or something?
Right, yeah, she plays the field of both. Like, in the comics, they even dated at some point.
Oh, okay.
But, yeah, it's kind of the same thing. You know, like where Catwoman is the thief. Black Cat is the same way. She's a thief. But she's also kind of the good guy. She'll help Spider-Man sometimes. Oh. So I can see her being in a movie, but I don't think she'll be the villain, because she's, first of all, there's not enough to her to really be a villain, I don't think. Oh. You know, it would be more interesting to have her in the, you know, the Catwoman type role, like, you know, like they're going to have in Batman. You know, where it's like she's a villain, but then she's an assistant at some point, you know?
Yeah. And I guess now that they're having that in Batman, I think it would kind of be too odd, too similar to actually, to have another cat, another one playing the same role. In this movie. So I guess we can scratch that, because if they do that, I think most people.
I mean, Black Cat does have powers. Her power is like not like Catwoman just has physical abilities. She doesn't have any powers. Black Cat has what they call bad luck powers. You know, where she can just wish bad luck on you. So, like, if you're standing on something, it'll all of a sudden break. Like, and the chances of that happening are, like, so slim to none, but it will happen. The cool thing about that power is that she's not really the greatest at directing it. So when she would be assisting Spider-Man, it would hurt the bad guys. Like, they'd fall or something. But then, like, Spider-Man's web line would break.
Oh.
So
it'll affect everybody, not just who she's
Right. She couldn't really direct it,
That's
so cool. That was kind of a cool aspect. So I would like to see her actually in the movie, in one of the movies like that, but she can't be the villain. I mean, I don't think that would be enough to be the villain.
Yeah, and I don't know enough other villains to actually think of who else could really be here, but because they had, again, I don't know the characters' names that well, but they had that Sand guy.
Right, Sandman, yeah.
Sandman. Did they have Rhino?
No, they didn't have Rhino.
Okay, that one I know. And I could actually see him being, maybe if they teamed him up with somebody else, he could be pretty big, because he was obviously dumb, right? He was a dumb
guy. He was just a bruiser type guy.
Yeah, so him teaming up with someone, maybe that electricity guy, that seemed like a pretty good duo that could cause, you got intelligence and crazy electricity stuff, and somebody that's just like a bulldozer. That's that to me could seem pretty good. Now, the original Spider-Man had, they did the whole Venom thing, right?
Right, in the third one, yeah.
But they didn't do Carnage.
Right.
So I mean, Carnage is sick. Carnage would be I think would be amazing. When I think of Spider-Man, I honestly think Spider-Man, Venom, and Carnage.
Right.
That's what I think of when I think of Spider-Man. Everyone else is just okay, yeah. But if they could do Carnage, I think that would be amazing, because Carnage is just so twisted.
Right.
He's just such a twisted character. It would be really interesting to see how they do him.
Yeah, because Carnage, the reason why Carnage was so twisted is because his his handler, Cletus Cassidy, was the guy who had his symbiote. He was a serial killer before he ever got a symbiote. Mm-hmm. So he was already a murderer and a killer, mm-hmm. whereas, Eddie Brock, who becomes Venom, was not a killer. He was just a journalist. He wrote articles, and he got mad at Spider-Man because Spider-Man made him lose his job because he revealed the true villain of the Sin Eater. So he was mad at Spider-Man, so that's why he became Venom, and that's why the symbiote came to him. But Cletus was a murderer already.
That part I did remember, but that just made for such a good character.
Right.
It reminds you of like Freddy from Friday the
Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah.
It reminds you of him, just a psycho ass, and I think. Right. Even if they don't do him in the second movie, I think he should be maybe the climax that they do in the third movie. But then again,
we'll see how they do it.
Yeah, there's just so much up in the air. But I guess if I'm excited for anyone, it would be that if they bring Carnage into it, and I would think Carnage to me was a big enemy. He kind of works side by side with Venom, kind of, not really, because
they were against each other. Yeah,
right, they were. What I meant to say is you always saw them kind of together, the three. It was Spider-Man, Venom, and Carnage.
Right.
That's what I meant to say. So if they do Carnage, you would think that they would have to do Venom again.
Right.
I don't know.
That's the problem with a lot of the Spider-Man villains is that it takes so long to build up these origins of these villains, mm-hmm. and to teach you about them and tell you about them. That's hard. That's not going to be easy for them to do. And if they leave things out, it's going to make the villains not as strong. Which, like I said, what you're going to see, what you see with the Lizard, he's not as strong of a villain because they don't have, not that they don't have the time. They could have made the time, I think, but whatever it is, that to add that layer of depth that makes you care about the villain.
Yeah. Well, I think we pretty much covered this movie today, which is great. So I guess I just want to ask, on a scale as generic as this is, but from a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest, what do you rate this film, being that you have this history with comics like you do?
I still think it was despite all the things that I didn't like about it, I still think it's a really good movie. I think it's a really good since this is going to be a trilogy. I think this is a good step.
Okay.
To grow from and to build on. You made me laugh looking at that. I would say from 1 to 10, I would say I'd give it an 8. Okay, for now, and I think, but it can definitely do better. And they could have done better, and they should have done better, and hopefully they will do better. I think the main reason it's an 8 is because the acting in the movie is so good. If the acting would have been anything below what it was, this movie would not be doing well at all. So I think they got a little lucky that despite having a fairly bland story, they had such good actors telling the story that you can almost look a little past that.
That's a good point. I actually would have to agree that that's a good grade to give this, an 8, and me taking it from a different perspective, not knowing the history like I did. I mean, there was enough to keep me into the movie. I guess in the beginning, because it was the beginning of this new trilogy, is a little slower in the beginning, obviously, to develop the characters and to kind of get you to understand that this is different than the other ones, because what is her name is not in here. You know who I'm talking about.
Mary Jane.
Mary Jane, thank you. Because Mary Jane is no longer in here, or just not in this in general. They had to get you to understand who the other girl was and not confuse the two and stuff like that. So in that respect, though it had my attention, it was a little slower. So I think that the next movie has the potential to be a higher score, because now that we have this developed, all they're really going to tell us is who the new villain is and why they're a villain, and get to the action. Do you know what I mean?
Right. So, which is why with comic book movies, normally the second one is always the best one.
Oh, okay.
Because the first, any comic movie, you can take X-Men 1, You can take Iron Man 1. You know, like the second one, some people will debate it with Iron Man, but the second one is always great because you're starting off. They're already the hero. You get to see all that action stuff. My biggest gripe with Iron Man 1 was that it was a great movie, but he's barely Iron Man. You know, he doesn't even become Iron Man until well halfway into the movie, you know? And he only really has 2 big scenes, you know? He has the scene where he's in the desert as Iron Man, and then he has the final scene where he fights the big robot. You know, you don't really see a lot of him as the hero. Whereas in Iron Man 2, he's Iron Man, you know, right as the movie starts. You know, he's jumping out of a plane and flying around, you know? Yeah. That's, you know, the same thing with, you know, the same thing with X-Men, you know? How long did it take for them to finally all get together and they finally become the X-Men, they finally do something, you know? Whereas X-Men 2, right off the bat, X-Men 2, Nightcrawlers fighting the President, you know, like, how awesome was that?
Yeah,
you know?
And usually the budgets obviously have a thing to do with that too, I think, you know, because now they have a ground to stand on. They know what worked and what didn't work, so that they can really put everything into the second movie. So I agree that the second movie of the Amazing Spider-Man trilogy has the potential to be even better. And if they nip the butt on the head or whatever the freak that expression is, I can't even say it. I don't even know why I said it. If they do that for the second movie with the enemy and keep them true enough to the original personality or whatever the heck you want to say for the enemy, then, you know, it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, just add, I mean, they can even create a whole new villain. Just add a little depth to it, you know, just add a little, you know. Give
more of a reason for them to be enemies.
Right, exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
That would be really good. So, yeah, I think this chat was really good. I hope everybody who has seen it, because there were a couple of viewers, is one viewer now, and anyone who's going to see it in the future, that they enjoy it, and we will be sure to do this more often. We have so many other movies to cover.
Oh, yeah.
So many other movies to cover. Like
yeah. Especially this year, there's a lot of good movies coming out.
There were a lot of good movies, and actually I saw, like, how many with you?
Yeah, exactly.
The one day we had that marathon, right?
Oh, right, yeah. We watched 3 movies in a row, yeah.
Yeah, that was good. Leading up to the Avengers movie was amazing.
Right, yeah, because we watched Captain America, Green Lantern, and Transformers, the last one, Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah, so we have
10 hours of movie watching right there.
I know, right? When will that happen again? I don't think we'll be able to do that. But all right, well, this was really good. Once again, thank you, and thank everybody else for watching. So I'm going to say...
Make sure everybody comments on here.
Yeah,
let us know what you think. You know, if we're terrible, if we're great, let us know what you think. Leave a review. Follow us, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. You know, I'm on Twitter a ton. My Twitter handle is Demenace, DAMENACELO37. So at DemenaceLo37, follow me.
What I can do also is make sure that our Twitter handles are on the description for this.
Okay, yeah, perfect.
Video, which would be great. And this video eventually will be on both of our channels.
Right.
So that, you know, if you have more relatable to Danny, that's perfect. That's
right.
Yeah.
But definitely comment, leave feedback, tell us what you think. What do you want us to talk about? What could we talk about that you'd like, or do you want to talk about something with us? You know, that's fine. You know, we enjoy discussion and debate.
Yeah, this has the potential to be whatever you guys really want this to be. We are starting this off for fun, and hopefully it'll take off into something a little bit more, because when you have an interest in something, when you're passionate about something, it's just great to have that discussion with everybody else.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, I'm going to say so long, so say your goodbye. Bye.
Huzzah.